Okay, so you've sent us a whole bunch of Yuval Noah Harari interviews.
Yeah,
Looks like you really want to get into the mind of this guy.
he's a fascinating thinker.
Yeah, from AI to the power of stories.
Hmm,
I mean, he's not afraid to tackle the big stuff.
not at all.
So it seems like you're looking to go a little deeper than just like the surface level stuff.
Yeah, I'm ready to dive in.
Let's do it then.
Okay,
This is going to be fun.
it is.
So one of the things that Harari talks about that really struck me is this idea that humans control the world because of stories.
Right.
It's that we're the only species that can really buy into these fictional stories and then actually cooperate around them
And on such a large scale.
on a massive scale.
Yeah,
So, okay, break this down for me a little bit.
sure.
What does he mean by fictional stories in this context?
He's talking about things that don't have a physical reality in and of themselves, but we all agree that they do, and that gives them power.
Okay.
So like money, for instance, it's
Yeah.
just pieces of paper or numbers on a screen. But it has this huge impact on our lives
Huge.
because we've all decided to believe in this story of its value.
So it's like we're all kind of playing this game together, and the rules of the game are the stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly.
So nations, religions, corporations,
Yeah, it's all stories.
all just stories that help us organize society.
It's how we make sense of the world, how we cooperate.
And this is what Harari calls intersubjective reality.
Right.
So it's like a shared reality that exists because we all agree to believe in it.
Exactly. It's powerful stuff.
It is incredibly powerful.
That's what allows us to build these massive societies and economies.
But it also makes us vulnerable, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if our reality is built on stories, then whoever controls those stories controls the reality.
Right. Think about propaganda or disinformation campaigns.
Oh, yeah.
They work by manipulating those stories that we already believe in, preying on our hopes and fears.
It's scary how effective that can be.
It is, and it's getting even more sophisticated with the rise of AI and social media.
Right, because now we're dealing with information overload.
Right.
We have access to more information than ever before.
Uh-huh.
But does Harari think that makes us more or less susceptible to this kind of manipulation?
Well, he has some really interesting things to say about that.
Okay.
You know, we have all this information at our fingertips,
Yeah.
but are we actually any wiser?
Good question.
He argues that more information doesn't necessarily equal more knowledge or better decisions.
So it's not just about the quantity of information, it's about the quality.
Exactly. And he points out that truth is often messy.
Okay.
It's complex. It can be painful even.
Right. It takes effort to sift through all the noise and find reliable sources.
And who wants to do that when there are these easy, appealing narratives out there that confirm what we already believe?
Right. So those catchy headlines, those viral memes, they might feel good in the moment,
Uh-huh.
but they might not be based in reality.
And they can distract us from the truth, which often requires a lot more effort to uncover.
He even compares the spread of misinformation today to the witch hunts in early modern Europe.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating parallel.
So how does that work?
Well, the printing press was this amazing invention, right?
Revolutionary.
Yeah, it democratized knowledge in a way that had never been seen before.
But
It also made it easier to spread misinformation.
like about witches.
Exactly. And this led to mass hysteria violence, all fueled by these shared delusions that were being spread through printed text.
It's kind of like social media today, right?
It is, and Harari's point is that these technologies, they can be tools for both good and bad.
Double-edged sword.
Yeah, and it's up to us to figure out how to use them wisely.
And this is what he sees as a major challenge for democracy.
Exactly, because democracy depends on informed citizens making rational decisions.
Right, and that gets harder and harder when we're drowning in a sea of misinformation.
Exactly, we become more susceptible to manipulation, and that undermines the whole foundation of democracy.
He also draws this really interesting parallel between democracy and dictatorship in terms of information control.
Huh.
Okay, curious about this.
Yeah.
How does he connect those two seemingly opposite systems?
Well, he points out that historically large-scale democracy was impossible before technologies like the printing press.
Okay.
You needed a way to disseminate information to a large population.
Right.
Dictatorships, on the other hand, thrived in environments where information was tightly controlled by a small elite.
Makes sense.
So technology can be used to both empower and control people.
Depending on who's wielding it.
Exactly. And with the rise of AI, we're entering a whole new era of information control.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah,
Because Harari sees AI as a game changer, unlike any technology that came before.
absolutely. He argues that AI is the first technology that can truly understand and manipulate human language.
And that has huge implications for everything.
Everything from finance to politics.
All right, so imagine AI writing political speeches that are perfectly crafted to tap into people's hopes and fears.
Or creating financial systems that are so complex that humans can't even comprehend them.
It's both fascinating and a little terrifying.
Yeah. And he even goes as far as to say that AI could become the ultimate bureaucrat.
Okay, what does that mean?
He's suggesting that AI could become this invisible hand guiding our societies, making decisions based on algorithms that are opaque to humans.
So we're talking about a shift in power, not from humans to robots, but from humans to algorithms.
Precisely. And that raises some serious questions about accountability and control.
It's like a whole new world of ethical and philosophical dilemmas.
It is, and it's something we need to start thinking about now before it's too late.
Before we create a world that we no longer understand or control.
Exactly.
And this all ties back to Harari's concerns about the erosion of trust, which is something he talks about a lot.
He does.
So why does he see this erosion of trust as such a threat?
Well, he argues that democracy relies on trust in institutions like courts, the media, elections.
Right, we need to believe that these institutions are fair and impartial.
Exactly. But when people lose faith in those institutions, they turn to alternative sources of information.
Which are often less reliable and more susceptible to manipulation.
Exactly. And that creates a vicious cycle.
Distrust leads to more misinformation, which leads to more distrust.
Exactly. And that can create fertile ground for the rise of populism and authoritarianism.
Because when people feel like the system is rigged,
Yeah.
they become more vulnerable to charismatic leaders who offer simplistic solutions and scapegoats to blame for complex problems.
Right. And with AI's ability to manipulate information and personalize messages, this dynamic could become even more potent.
So it's not just about AI becoming super intelligent, it's about AI becoming super persuasive,
Exactly.
able to tailor messages to individual psychological profiles in ways that we may not even be aware of.
He uses this chilling phrase to describe this hacking humans.
It's like we're becoming more and more vulnerable to these invisible forces that are shaping our thoughts and behaviors.
And that's why Harari emphasizes the need for individual and collective action to address these challenges.
Okay, so let's start with the individual.
Okay.
What can we do to navigate this information landscape and resist manipulation?
Well, one of the most important things is to cultivate critical thinking skills.
Right, so we need to be able to evaluate information sources, assess the credibility of claims, and not just believe everything we read or hear.
Exactly. It's about being discerning consumers of information.
And it's also about being aware of our own biases, because we all have them, whether we realize it or not.
Right.
And all biases can influence how we interpret information and make decisions.
And he also advocates for something he calls an information diet.
Okay, I like this.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this information diet.
It's basically the idea that just like we need to be mindful of what we eat to stay physically healthy, we need to be mindful of the information we consume to stay mentally and emotionally healthy.
So it's about being selective about our sources,
Yeah.
fact-checking information before we share it, and being aware of our own biases.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for the information we allow into our minds.
It's like a mental detox.
No way. Yeah.
And he also stresses the importance of education.
Right? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in media literacy.
Because we need to equip people with the tools to analyze information critically, to distinguish between fact and fiction, and to recognize propaganda and manipulation when they see it.
Exactly. This is essential for safeguarding democracy in the age of information.
But it's not just about individual action, is it?
No.
Harari also talks about the need for systemic changes.
He does.
So what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, he argues that we need to reform our institutions to make them more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the needs of citizens.
Okay, so it's about strengthening democracy, rebuilding trust in institutions, and finding ways to ensure that technology serves humanity rather than controlling it.
Exactly. It's a tall order, but it's essential if we want to create a future that is truly beneficial for all.
It's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of the specific ways in which Harari's ideas can inform our understanding of the challenges and opportunities we face in the 21st century.
Looking forward to it. Picking up where we left off last time, one of the things that really stuck with me was Harari's idea of AI as the ultimate bureaucrat.
Right, you mentioned that last time.
Yeah, and I think it's worth unpacking a bit more.
Yeah, I'm curious about this too. What does he actually mean by that? It sounds kind of ominous.
It is a bit, right? He's not talking about robots with like briefcases and red tape.
Right.
He's talking about something much more subtle and potentially more powerful.
So it's not about robots taking over, it's about algorithms taking over.
Exactly, and that's a much harder thing to wrap your head around.
Right, because algorithms are invisible. They're everywhere, but we don't really see them.
Yeah, and that's what makes them so potentially dangerous.
So this idea of AI as the ultimate bureaucrat is basically saying that these algorithms could become the invisible hand guiding our societies.
Right, making decisions that affect our lives in profound ways, but in ways that we might not even understand, let alone control.
It's like giving up control to a black box.
Exactly. And that raises all sorts of questions about accountability and transparency.
Right, like if an algorithm makes a decision that harms someone who's responsible.
Right. Is it the programmer?
Yeah.
The company that owns the algorithm itself?
It's a really tricky question.
It is, and it's something we need to start thinking about now because this is already happening.
It's not some far-off science fiction scenario. It's happening right now.
Right. And as AI gets more sophisticated, these issues are only going to become more complex and more urgent.
And this lack of transparency can further erode trust, right?
Absolutely. People are already skeptical of institutions like big tech companies and governments.
Yeah, right. And if they feel like they're being controlled by algorithms that they don't understand, that distrust is only going to grow.
And that can lead to all sorts of social and political instability.
Exactly. It's a recipe for chaos.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it feels kind of overwhelming.
Well, one of the things Harari emphasizes is the need for ethical guidelines and regulations for AI.
Okay, so we need to set some ground rules.
We do, and we need to do it now before it's too late.
But who gets to decide what those guidelines should be?
That's a great question, and it's something that's being debated right now by experts all over the world.
It's a global issue.
It is, and it's going to require a global response.
So it's not just about individual countries setting their own rules.
No, we need some kind of international cooperation and consensus on this.
And that's a big challenge.
It is, but
Yeah.
it's a challenge we need to meet if we want to ensure that AI is used for good and not for harm.
Harari also talks about the potential for AI to create these new financial instruments, almost like AlphaGo's revolutionary approach to the game of Go. Right, he makes this analogy between AI and the ancient game of Go.
Yeah, and how AlphaGo was able to beat the best human players by coming up with moves that no one had ever seen before.
Exactly. And he suggests that AI could do the same thing in the realm of finance.
So we're talking about AI coming up with financial strategies that are so complex and so innovative that humans can't even comprehend them.
Exactly. And that could have huge implications for the global economy.
Right, because it could create immense wealth, but it could also lead to new forms of inequality and instability.
Right. And it could make it even harder for humans to understand and control the financial system.
It's like handing over the keys to the global economy to a super intelligent but potentially unpredictable entity.
And that's a pretty scary thought.
It is, and it highlights the need for caution and foresight as we develop and deploy these powerful new technologies.
Exactly. We need to be thinking about not just the potential benefits, but also the potential risks. And we need to be prepared to mitigate those risks.
And it all comes back to this question of who's in control.
Right. Do we want to be the masters of our own destiny, or do we want to cede control to these powerful new technologies?
It's a choice we have to make. And the choices we make today will have profound consequences for the future of humanity.
You know, it's a lot to take in all this stuff about AI in the future.
It is, yeah.
But Harari doesn't leave us just hanging with all these warnings.
Right? He actually offers some solutions, or at least some paths forward.
Yeah, he does. He's not just a doom and gloom kind of guy.
Okay, so what are some of the things he suggests we do to kind of navigate these challenges and create a better future?
Well, one of the most important things he talks about is the need for a global perspective.
Okay.
Like the problems we face today, climate change, AI, these things don't stop at borders, right?
They're global issues.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
we can't just be focused on our own little corner of the world.
Right. We need to start thinking about solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah, he argues that this old way of thinking about the world, like nation states competing against each other,
Right.
it's just not going to cut it anymore.
We're all interconnected.
Exactly. We need a new model of global cooperation, one that recognizes our shared humanity and our interdependence.
It's like that famous image of Earth from space, the pale blue dot.
Yeah.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does. You see how fragile and interconnected our world is?
It's like we're all crewmates on this tiny spaceship, hurtling through the vastness of space.
Exactly, and we need to start acting like it.
We need to work together if we want to survive and thrive.
And that's why Harari stresses this idea of cultivating a sense of global citizenship.
Okay, so what does that mean? What does it actually look like to be a global citizen?
Well, it's about expanding our circle of compassion to include all of humanity. It's about understanding that the well-being of people in other countries is just as important as the well-being of people in our own country.
So it's about breaking down those mental barriers that divide us.
Right. The us versus them mentality.
Yeah, the tribalism.
Exactly. We need to start seeing ourselves as part of one big global family.
All facing the same challenges, all hoping for a better future.
Right.
And that's a tough thing to do sometimes, you know?
It is, especially in a world that often feels so divided and polarized.
It's easy to get caught up in those divisions.
Yeah. But Harari challenges us to think bigger, to see beyond our own narrow perspectives.
He also talks a lot about the importance of understanding history.
He does.
Not just as a collection of facts and dates, but as a source of wisdom and guidance for the future.
Right, because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but it's true.
It is, and Harari's point is that by studying history, we can learn from the mistakes of the past.
We can see the patterns.
Exactly, and that can help us make better decisions in the present.
So history is not just about the past, it's about the future.
Exactly. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped our world and using that understanding to create a better future.
And that's what makes Harari's work so compelling. He connects the dots between the past, the present, and the future in a way that few other thinkers can.
Yeah, he helps us see the big picture, the long arc of history, and our place within it.
And that leads us to another important question that Harari raises. How do we find meaning and purpose in our lives?
It's a big question, right?
It is, especially in a world that often feels so chaotic and overwhelming.
Yeah, like where do we fit in? What's it all
Yeah.
about?
What's the point of it all?
Exactly. And Harari suggests that true meaning and purpose come not from external achievements or material possessions,
Okay.
but from connecting with something larger than ourselves.
So it's about finding something that gives our lives a sense of direction and significance.
Right. Something that transcends our own individual ego and connects us to something greater.
So that could be a spiritual pursuit, a connection to nature, a commitment to social justice.
It could be any number of things. The important thing is that it gives our lives meaning.
It's about finding our place in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And recognizing that our lives have value and purpose beyond just our own individual happiness.
And that's a powerful message, especially in a world that often feels so focused on the individual and on material success.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the rat race and lose sight of what really matters.
So Harari is reminding us to step back and think about the bigger picture.
Exactly. And to remember that we're all part of something much larger than ourselves.
And that even in the face of all the challenges we face, there's still reason to be hopeful.
Absolutely. Humanity has achieved incredible things throughout history.
Right. We've overcome enormous challenges.
Well, we have, and we
Wow.
have this incredible capacity for creativity, innovation, compassion.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all. There's a lot to be optimistic about if we choose to focus on the good and work together to create a better future.
So it's a choice.
It is, we can choose to succumb to fear and division, or we can choose to believe in the power of human ingenuity and cooperation.
It's like Harari is saying the future is not set in stone.
Yeah.
It's a story that we're all writing together.
And the choices we make today will determine the ending of that story.
That's a powerful image.
It is, and it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
So what are some of the key takeaways from our deep dive into Harari's work?
Well, I think one of the most important things is this idea that we need to be aware of the power of stories.
Right. Both the stories that others tell us and the stories that we tell ourselves.
Exactly, because those stories shape our perceptions, our beliefs, our actions.
And we need to be critical thinkers.
Absolutely. We need to be able to evaluate information sources, assess the credibility of claims, and not just blindly accept everything we hear.
And we need to be aware of our own biases.
Right, because those biases can distort our thinking and lead us to make bad decisions.
We also need to cultivate a sense of global citizenship.
Right. We need to start thinking beyond national borders and recognizing our shared humanity and interdependence.
And we need to find meaning and purpose in our lives by connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Whether that's a spiritual pursuit, a commitment to social justice, or something else entirely.
It's about finding something that gives our lives significance and direction.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that we have the power to choose our path.
We can choose to create a better future.
We can, and that's a message of hope that I think we all need to hear.
It is, and it's a message that I hope will stay with us long after this deep dive is over.
Me too.
So thank you for joining us on this journey into the mind of Yuval Noah Harari.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to make the world a better place.